On this Monday night, Canada just hours away from being hit with those hefty U.S. tariffs. How the American president is trying to spin the plan.
It's going to be very costly for people to take advantage of this country.
And how Canada intends to strike back.
We are ready.
Paving a path to peace, the UK's 4-point plan to help Ukraine, and what Canada may end up doing. 3 earthquakes in 2 weeks, how southern BC has been rattled again. And the film that dominated the Oscars.
You're so classy.
The Canadians contributing to the success of Anora.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada is on the eve of an unprecedented trade war with the United States. If the American president can be taken at his word, his long-threatened 25% tariffs on all Canadian exports to the U.S. will begin at midnight.
They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs. It's a very powerful weapon.
Mexico is in the same boat, facing 25% tariffs, and Trump says he will increase tariffs on Chinese imports from 10 to 20%. U.S. stocks fell sharply right after this announcement. The Canadian and Mexican dollar also fell. Canada has vowed to retaliate. We will get to that in just a moment, but we begin with Heather Yourex-West in Washington. Heather.
Donna, after months of diplomatic efforts and investments to stop what economists warn will be crippling for Canada's economy, the United States says those punishing U.S. tariffs are going ahead.
Percentage of the chips made.
Donald Trump says Canada is out of time.
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
25% tariffs on Canadian exports, with energy exports receiving an exception at 10%, according to February's executive order, because the U.S. president says Canada hasn't done enough to secure the border.
Why Canada? Why our trading partners in the north?
On U.S. cable networks CNN and CNBC, officials spent the morning building a case the move won't end up costing American consumers more.
No inflation. And the reason why is a complex chain of macro things that begins with the fact that the exporting countries, which are dependent on our markets, absorb a large share of the tariffs.
Let's let outside people who live and breathe off our economy, let them start paying, and let's reduce the tax burden on Americans.
But tariffs are paid by importers and will at some level be passed on to consumers, which, for a president who campaigned on cutting inflation, could lead to business and consumer backlash. Within minutes of Trump's confirmation Monday, the Dow fell dramatically. In a rare public comment to CBS News, legendary American investor Warren Buffett had strong words.
I mean, tariffs are actually, we've had a lot of experience with them. They're an act of war to some degree.
Buffett is right. It is moving the needle back 80 years to the way things used to be. And the potential for miscommunications, misunderstanding, economic isolation increases the risk that war can happen, whether in a physical sense or an economic sense.
But Trump remains resolute in his plan, believing tariffs will make foreign companies relocate to the U.S., a point he illustrated today alongside the CEO of a Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturer who announced a $100 billion investment. The president will next work to convince the markets and voters of his economic vision with his first major speech to Congress, an unofficial State of the Union address scheduled for tomorrow night. Donna?
All right, Heather Yourex-West in Washington tonight. Thanks. Trump has been dangling this threat over Canada for so long that if it finally happens, it will be no surprise. And Canada is ready to respond. Mackenzie Gray is with me from Ottawa. Mackenzie.
With the tariffs seemingly set to come into place at midnight, Donna, the federal government is now preparing to hit back with its own retaliation measures.
We are ready should the U.S. decide to launch their trade war.
Ottawa's plan to slap $155 billion worth of tariffs on the U.S. seems to be back in place, $30 billion of which would come in immediately. And it's not just the federal government. Expect provinces to take U.S. alcohol off provincial liquor store shelves, but Ontario is willing to go a lot further.
If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy. with a smile on my face.
One thing is certain, in a trade war, impacts will be substantial.
No matter what we do, if tariffs come into place, it is going to be painful for the Canadian economy. 1 million jobs at risk is no joke.
The feds have always publicly accepted Trump's official reasoning for the tariffs.
When President Trump is talking about imposing tariffs, it must be linked to what's going on at the border.
Canada committed $1.3 billion on a new border plan and named a fentanyl czar to try and decrease the only 0.2% of fentanyl that goes from Canada to the U.S. Not enough for the president, who gave an alternative reason for why the tariffs are coming.
I would just say this to people in Canada or Mexico: if they're going to build car plants, the people that are doing them are much better off building here.
An attack on the auto sector that's worth $51 billion in trade for Canada.
It's really about Mr. Trump trying to get Canada using economic leverage with respect to this 51st state.
The last round of tariff talks led to a 30-day pause after 2 phone calls between Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump. But as it stands now, Donna, there's not a conversation set between the two leaders for today.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. The threats and uncertainty are already taking their toll on Canadian businesses, both big and small. Our senior business correspondent, Andrea Macpherson, is with me. And there are tens of thousands of business owners across this country who are extremely anxious right now. What are you hearing about how this is affecting them and how they can prepare when there's so much uncertainty?
Donna, there's a lot of concern, fear, and anxiety. Business owners are hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. And that means planning for a plethora of scenarios. The impact of a blanket tariff, possible exemptions, gaming out how long such tariffs would be in effect, figuring out the impact of possible retaliatory tariffs and potential government support. The CEO of Ambico Steel, which is based in Ottawa, tells Global News his company is working to figure out what a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, which is set to be levied next week, means for his company, which sells 70% of its product into the U.S.
We are speaking daily with our lawyers and consultants and accountants to say, okay, figure me out the worst possible case scenario. I'm really worried, but I'm 72 years old. I've been in this business 40 years, and I've seen a lot of change. I've not seen change like this.
Worth noting that larger, well-established companies are better positioned to weather this tariff storm. Smaller, less nimble companies with less financial cushion more likely to be collateral damage in all of this.
And what about the impact on workers? People who fear they're in an industry that might suffer, worried they could lose their jobs.
2.5 million Canadian jobs are directly tied to trade with the U.S. And according to analyst estimates, if escalation leads to a trade war, we could see 1.5 million Canadian jobs lost within the first year of blanket and retaliatory tariffs being implemented. Now, tariff uncertainty has already resulted in layoffs, and we're already seeing business paralysis. So expansion, buying, and hiring plans frozen. At the household level, tariff uncertainty has caused people to pause spending, delay that vacation, skip the kids' swimming lessons this season. The head of the Canadian Labour Congress, which represents more than 3 million workers, tells me some homeowners are making plans to sell their home because job security remains a big question mark. Donna?
So much on the line. Andrea Macpherson in Toronto, thank you. Prime Minister Trudeau is back in Canada now, but before he left the UK, he had a private meeting with King Charles. Trudeau tweeted they spoke about matters of importance to Canadians, including, above all, he said, Canada's sovereign and independent future. The King has faced calls to be a vocal supporter of Canada after Trump's repeated insult that Canada should be America's 51st state. King Charles has invited Trump to the UK for what would be a second state visit. Trudeau was in the UK for a meeting with European leaders to discuss how to support Ukraine. Britain and France want to create a coalition of the willing to try to secure a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's president has said he is not prepared to cede any territory to Russia, and Trump continues to try to strong-arm him into a deal without any security guarantees. Late today, there are multiple reports quoting unnamed U.S. officials that Trump has paused all military aid to Ukraine. Redmond Shannon reports.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin.
Donald Trump is not letting up on his criticism of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, responding to the Ukrainian president telling reporters he believes peace is still very far away.
He thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right about that.
Zelenskyy attempting to clarify on social media, saying Ukrainians very much hope on US support on the path to peace. Peace is needed as soon as possible.
Can Europe defend itself without America, Mr. President?
The UK hosted a summit Sunday involving European leaders, Zelenskyy and Justin Trudeau. Afterwards, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a 4-point plan. To continue aid to Ukraine and sanctions against Russia, that Ukraine must be involved in peace talks and its sovereignty be protected, to boost Ukraine's future defence capabilities, and to form a coalition of the willing to defend any peace deal. Britain and France are so far the only nations to commit to peacekeeping troops in Ukraine.
A number of countries and allies indicated their support. They will set that out in due course.
Trudeau is not ruling out potential Canadian boots on the ground.
Everything's on the table.
Starmer, who appears to have gotten off on the right foot with Trump, wants to bring these commitments to the US president to see what role Washington could play.
To succeed, this effort must also have strong US backing.
The head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said Monday she will present a plan to EU leaders this week on what she calls the urgent need for Europe to rearm. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London, thanks. Hamas is accusing Israel of trying to collapse the second phase of the ceasefire agreement. Israel is trying to force Hamas into accepting what it calls a new ceasefire plan backed by the U.S. And it has cut off the supply of food and other humanitarian goods to Gaza until it happens. The plan demands Hamas continue to release the remaining hostages without Israel withdrawing its troops. The second phase of the ceasefire was supposed to begin yesterday, but negotiations last week to hammer out details failed. In Germany, 2 people are dead and at least 25 others injured after a driver rammed his car into a crowd. An 83-year-old woman and 54-year-old man were killed. It happened in Mannheim. A 40-year-old German national was arrested and remains in hospital under police security. Investigators say the attack was not politically motivated, and they believe the driver acted alone. There's an update on the health of Pope Francis. The Vatican says he suffered 2 episodes of what it calls acute respiratory failure. Doctors had to intervene and say the 88-year-old is again using an oxygen mask and ventilator to assist his breathing. Pope Francis has been in hospital for more than 2 weeks. He was first admitted for double pneumonia. The Vatican says the Pope remains alert and focused. Another earthquake shakes BC's south coast. Coming up, are the recent events related, and is it a hint of what's to come? There is excitement at Mission Control for Firefly Aerospace in Texas after its unmanned Blue Ghost lander touched down on the moon. It is the first private company to successfully put a spacecraft on the moon without incident. The lander is carrying a Canadian-made lunar dust repellent that will be used to help carry out experiments over the next 2 weeks. There's been more seismic activity across British Columbia, and many people across the south coast were woken up just after 5 a.m. by a 4.1 magnitude earthquake. I felt it. It is the 3rd sizable earthquake to hit the region in just over a week. Andrea Macpherson is tracking the tremors for us. Andrea.
Well, Donna, many people were jolted out of bed even before their alarm clocks went off Monday morning. Others woke up to texts from friends and family asking, did you feel it?
My bed shook a little bit. I'm like, what is that? It was like a tremor. It didn't last very long.
I know a few of my friends in Victoria said they felt it this morning.
Yes, that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, that's what I heard. They said the whole house was rumbling.
No, didn't feel anything. The 4.1 magnitude quake struck off the coast of Victoria, measured at a depth of about 20 kilometers.
But it was fairly shallow. So when you have a source shallower in the crust, it tends to be felt more over a larger area and felt more strongly.
Fortunately, there are no reports of damage and there was no threat of a tsunami.
An earthquake like this doesn't tell us that we're
that another one is about to happen. It's a really small earthquake compared to the 7s and the 8s that have happened in the past.
A little over a week ago, 2 other earthquakes hit coastal BC. A 4.7 magnitude earthquake was felt near Sechelt on the Sunshine Coast on February 21st, and a 5.0 magnitude quake was felt in Port Alice off the coast of Vancouver Island on February 25th.
They're all friendly reminders that we do live in an active earthquake zone. We've seen much larger earthquakes in the past.
So we know we're due, we just don't know when.
Earthquakes Canada says public alerts are sent out for earthquakes estimated to be at or above a magnitude 5. So although there was certainly some shaking to be felt here, people weren't alerted to this latest one on their mobile device. Donna.
Okay, Andrea Macpherson in Surrey, BC, thanks. Ahead, the symptoms of colon cancer you need to watch for. Doctors in Canada are calling for greater awareness about the symptoms of colon cancer. About 25,000 Canadians are diagnosed with it every year, and increasingly, young people are developing it. Catherine Ward explains what you need to know about the symptoms and the screening.
Sometimes in life, you're sent angels to look over you, and in many ways, sometimes people know you better than you know yourself.
Annette Fishman's angel is Igor, her high school sweetheart and husband of nearly 30 years.
He told me that I should get checked out because I was incredibly tired. I almost canceled that appointment, and in many ways, if I would have canceled that appointment, I wouldn't be here sitting at this moment.
A colonoscopy revealed a cancerous tumor at the top of her rectum. At 45, with 3 children and a thriving career, Annette was in disbelief.
I'm conscious about my health. I've never smoked in my life. I don't drink regularly.
Your mentor doesn't need to come with us.
Dr. Peter Stotland is the chief of surgery at North York General Hospital in Toronto. He says even though screening is recommended to start at age 50, 10% of the patients he diagnoses are under 40.
If someone is having symptoms, a change in bowel habits, a change in the size of someone's stool, if there's bleeding, if there's just a very big change, not to think it's normal, go see a doctor, get it checked out, ask for a colonoscopy.
Surgery is one option, but a tailored approach involving radiation and chemotherapy is becoming more common.
Now we're able to decrease the morbidity, decrease the mortality of the disease at the same time. So in other words, patients can get away with less treatment and have better outcomes.
Annette was treated with an aggressive combination of radiation and oral chemotherapy. That got rid of the tumor with no surgery required.
It was very exciting to see, an awful looking tumor completely melt away or disappear.
5 years later, doctors say there is little chance the cancer will come back. Annette can focus on her work and family once more, and she's encouraging others to get screened. Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
Some star power is adding to the buzz around the WNBA's first Canadian franchise. Tennis great Serena Williams is joining the Toronto Tempo's ownership group. Williams says the Tempo will be more than just a basketball team and will showcase what she says is the true value and potential of female athletes. The team's first season starts next year.
It's a frog marriage, and we're getting in an old SAP.
Next, the Canadian connection to this year's Oscar winner for Best Picture. That is No Other Land. It won Best Documentary Film at the Oscars last night. It's about life under Israeli occupation and the forced displacement of Palestinians from their villages in the West Bank by the Israeli military. It was made by 2 Palestinians and 2 Israeli filmmakers, and in their acceptance speech, they called on the world to take serious actions to stop what they call the injustice and stop what they call the ethnic cleansing of Palestinian people. The documentary has won multiple film awards, but hardly any Americans or Canadians have seen it because no North American distributor has been willing to pick it up and show it in theaters. The biggest winner last night had the smallest budget of any of the films nominated for Best Picture. Anora, an independent film about a sex worker who elopes with a Russian oligarch's son, won 5 awards, including Best Actress, and a record-breaking 4 awards for director Sean Baker, who made it for just $6 million. And as Eric Sorensen explains, there were important Canadian contributions behind the scenes.
It was a shocker, a 25-year-old playing a sex worker in a small-budget film, winning the Best Actress Oscar.
Hi, I'm Annie.
I'm Ivan. As Anora, Mikey Madison hooks up with the son of a Russian oligarch.
Will you marry me? Seriously?
Seriously. And all hell breaks loose.
I am telling you, you do not know this guy.
Do not touch me!
It's profane, violent, and very funny. In winning the award, Madison said she was pleased to honor sex workers who've been exploited and abused throughout human history. And one of them was Andrea Macpherson, the author of Modern Whore, a book about her life as a sex worker in Toronto. Sean Baker, the Oscar-winning director, read Macpherson's book and hired her as a consultant to him and Mikey Madison.
Mikey had said that she felt like Annie and me would be friends at the strip club.
Macpherson, who's also an actress, hopes to destigmatize the lives of sex workers.
We continue to live in a world that is largely hostile to us and our safety and our livelihoods. And so I think the best way to combat that is through sex worker storytelling.
Anora was made for just $6 million. Samantha Kwan is the Canadian producer and spouse of director Sean Baker, who says the awards validate making films like Anora that should play in big theaters. It's being celebrated on International Sex Worker Rights Day that advocates for the safety and legitimacy of sex workers around the world.
Sex workers are human beings who are worthy of dignity and decency and equality like everybody else.
A simple message that's being heard today thanks to a madcap movie that beat them all at the Oscars. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is an overhead view of Round Island off the coast of Nanaimo, BC. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.